Here we go again. More lower ducks. Not ducks, but maybe there could be lower ducks, I guess, at some point. This is lower decks madness. Oh, right. So,
there could be ducks down in the cetacean area.
And in fact, if I remember right, I think the Sternbach deck plans, I think the Master Systems display for the Galaxy class, I think somewhere on one of those decks is a couple of rubber ducks. If you look really closely,
you're right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're right. I do remember that. Okay, awesome. Anyways, so you know what? This is Lower Decks. And I'm Michael Dismuke with Continuing Conversations. This is a podcast about anything and everything Star Trek Adventures RPG, along with, I'm a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 fan site for Star Trek Adventures RPG. And I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG. I said Star Trek Adventures RPG a lot. Okay. And now introducing Jim Johnson.
Hey, everybody. Jim Johnson, project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG, published by Medipius Entertainment. Lo these many years, and co-host on this here show with Michael Dismuke. Lo these many 80-odd episodes now, I think. We're getting on to 80 here, I think. Starbase 80? No, not Starbase 80, but 80 episodes. So, just banging along here, having a great time, talking all about Lower Decks now these last couple of weeks, continuing to do that for the next few weeks. And tonight we'll be talking all about Chapter 4 of the Lower Decks campaign guide. And we have the party responsible for writing the entirety of this chapter, pretty much. And Aaron, introduce yourself, please.
I'm Aaron Pollyea. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures. I've been around since, I guess, the beginning. Mm-hmm. I tend to focus on starships, science, technology, engineering stuff. So yeah, I guess I fit fairly well for writing this chapter on science and technology.
Yep.
Yeah, he also plays the chief science officer of the USS Pioneer, the hat he's wearing there, which is my game. He plays Commander Talak Job Nalanid, which is a very, very fun Tellarite science officer to have. All right.
You want me to take the lead, Michael? You want to?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. Well, this chapter is all about chapter 4 of the Lower Decks campaign guide, which is all about science and technology. We got 2 sub-chapters here. The first one's Wonders of the Universe, which talks about all the science, all the stellar phenomena, et cetera, that we see to some extent in Lower Decks in the first few seasons there, but actually goes into a lot more detail, obviously, because we need to provide game masters and players with enough sciencey content that you can spin and fold and mutilate that into your own campaigns and stories. So this is a lot of the information in here is a continuation and expansion and additional stuff that builds on from what we had in the core book and the science division book, and even the Shackleton book, the appendix in the Shackleton book that talked about building out your own sectors with spectral classes of stars and sectors and all that great stuff, all that great sciencey stuff that Aaron brings to the table here. So I'm going to stop rambling and just have Aaron. Why don't you kick us into this first part of the chapter here? Tell us all about what you wanted to bring in here as far as science and stellar phenomena and so on and so forth.
Well, I didn't want to repeat a lot of the things that I had said in previous books, like the core book, the science division book. So I wanted to add things to it that we specifically saw in Lower Decks. So a lot of what I have written in this first part is basically saying, hey, look, the universe is filled with dangerous things. The whole universe is dangerous. Just regular vacuum outside your spaceship is going to be dangerous. What you need to do is figure out how to make that into an interesting story and not have it so esoteric that it doesn't really connect with your characters. And that kind of gets into the later part with like the koala at the end of Space and Time. You don't want something so weird that your characters can't connect with it. You need to have it grounded in something else.
Yeah, so, we've talked about it too in previous. I like to add here too is some people are wondering how they can use this. I, for one, am not the type to just come. You, Aaron, are able to come up with this stuff, but you hit that keyboard and you come up with all these stellar phenomenons. Me, I'll oftentimes, while I'm in a game, I will cut and paste or read directly from, by the way, this is what you're coming across. And so you've just added to the wealth of resource from the science division, the Shackleton division, all these spatial anomalies. These are just even more to create variety of gameplay for game masters, which is what I really like about them.
Well, thanks. And yeah, please feel free to like direct me. Otherwise, again, I tend to babble when I talk about these things.
Can't be any worse than me. Can't be any worse than me. I'll just go on tangents all night long. So, but yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about like some of the stuff that you added here? Obviously, you added more detail about the class 1 through 5 stars and accretion disks and all that great stuff. You talk about planetoids to some extent. You talk more about how things have effects on ships. Of course, that's really important for Star Trek and for gaming, because it's like space is full of, I don't remember the direct quote from McCoy in the J.J. Abrams movie about, space is full of terror and death and is there waiting to destroy you. And you think about it, these ships have very thin hulls and have this energy barrier, protecting you from certain death. And if I don't know, like in this day and age, if I were transported onto a starship, that would be in the back of my mind. Like I'm on a ship that could be wiped out in like a matter of microseconds. And I guess you just put that in the back of your mind and you don't think about it and get on with your day. But, you have this great sidebar about, the effects of things on starships. And literally, like, I know we riff all the time. Like, the three of us could easily take any sentence out of that sidebar and create a whole episode or campaign out of that just one single sentence, because that's what you do. You pack so much great stuff into here. And that's something I want to remind game masters and players about this, not just this book, but all of our books, is they're dense, right? They are idea heavy, and that's by design. And like some people might get tired of reading these books, but like there is so much potential packed into every one of these pages that you really should be spending some time unpacking them. But yeah, tell us a little bit about just writing these sidebars about the effects on ships and stuff.
Well, yeah, I wanted to try to combine a lot of different ideas into certain categories. So like with the black hole accretion disks, I didn't want to just write about black hole accretion disks and what their effect on a starship can do. Like, yeah, I do that, but I also wanted to explain what accretion disks were, that how debris tends to fall down into these disks, rotating around. It's how planets form. It's how moons form. It's how rings are, because Roche limit, and I kind of explained what a Roche limit is. It's basically where a body gets too close to another large body, and one side of that body wants to pull faster towards the larger body than the back end, so it tears it apart. It's why gas giants tend to have rings, because they're really large and the things that are around them are fairly small. So I try to like put in with accretion disks, these black hole accretion disks, like the really easy things, the low energy stuff is like, planetary rings. Let's just do that. Planetary rings. Then you get into higher energy stuff. But for effects on ships, I thought, okay, well, in a low energy environment, so a planetary ring system, let's say what you see Voyager going across in the intro sequence to Star Trek Voyager, the biggest problem is basically maneuvering around the larger pieces of a ring system. Like dust, gas, little pebbles are probably getting knocked away by the navigational deflector. But when you have something the size of a school bus or a runabout coming at you, you might want to actually maneuver away from that rather than rely on your deflector dish. So that's where I say, hey, look, the complication range for any con tasks might increase by 1 or 2 depending on how thick the ring system is here. Mm-hmm. And you can take stress damage from failing that. Then you get into like the class 3 and 4 disks, and that's like stellar orbital speed, so like a planetary accretion disk, something like that, or really large super gas giants. And it's the same thing. It's like increasing the difficulty of the con tasks and also the complication range, increasing the damage more. and giving some ideas for like different complications that can occur if the character rolls a complication. Like I have down here degraded shield efficiency or navigational sensors blinded, setting up a gravitational eddy because your impulse drive is now like setting up some swirling pattern behind you. And then the class 5 ones are like, hey, this is a black hole accretion disk. If you're going to be in it, even with shields up, you're likely not in for a good time because a black hole's accretion disk has debris that's traveling at very close to the speed of light, and particles rubbing against each other at very close to the speed of light produces ions and radiation. And that can be further accelerated if the black hole is rotating and you have a magnetic field.
And to be clear, this was all inspired from just that opening sequence in Lower Decks, right?
Yeah, them tumbling towards like a black. And I'm like, oh no.
I love that. I love that. Good. So if you're all wondering what's happening in that first opening scene, this is what's happening. All of these. This is so cool.
You need to get your ship away from that accretion disk before everyone turns into red goo inside.
Or to go into it really fast so that you can actually get enough velocity to escape it, right?
Unless you're traveling with the particles that are traveling at near the speed of light. But then even if you do, then you actually have some time dilation issues. Always remember time dilation. That's why there's a limit on your impulse sublight speed. If you didn't know that, you don't want to get too close to the speed of light. Otherwise,
I don't need to know that. That's why I have you as my chief science officer. You're supposed to tell me that as I'm going into it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that bad up until you get very close to the speed of light. But even at half the speed of light, let's say, I think the maximum for impulse speed is limited to like a third of the speed of light. But even if you were at half, the time dilation is not too bad. I forget exactly what it is. I think it's like 0.7 or something like that. Anyway.
Okay, back to Michael level stuff. What's the difference between a planet and a planetoid?
Size. No,
that's it.
If you wanted to actually have, you could actually have a Tellarite style debate on what is a planet and what is a planetoid, depending on like the modern definitions. But in general, it would be like, hey, it's a planet if it is large enough to hold an atmosphere over a long-term period. So a planetoid would be something, it's still large. Like you could say the moon would be a planetoid if it was off by itself. Ceres, the asteroid belt's largest asteroid, is a planetoid, right? We would probably define them as like minor planets today, but I'm sure that in the 23rd and 24th centuries, their definitions are slightly different. Yeah, planetoids are basically just smaller worlds that are typically lifeless, have no atmosphere, can be made of rock, ice, or a combination of them both. And that does not mean that they are boring at all. That does not mean that they don't have tons of things that could be very, very interesting about them. I mean, if you just think about the moon, you can go, okay, well, there are like the seas, the large flat black areas of volcanic remnants. Then you have the mountains, but you also have like the pole areas that you could have deep craters that have ice in and ice caverns. And then, the old volcanic tubes, lava tubes that are underneath the surface. And you can keep going with these interesting ideas that any lifeless quote unquote planetoid could easily have life.
Yeah, I like how you even add that they could be places where there's secret weapons caches and treasure troves. So yeah, all right.
I'm not sure if it's in Alpha Canon or if it was mentioned in the books, and this is where I should have asked Scott at one point. But dilithium does not like forming in high gravity environments like large planets. So like Earth doesn't have dilithium, but asteroids can have dilithium form. Okay, so like the place that has lots of dilithium in the solar system is Io, just because there's lots of volcanism. It's small, it doesn't really hold an atmosphere. But I mean, hey, you're mining moons and asteroids for dilithium. This is where those really cool subspace enhanced elements are that have like strange quirks in them. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh, so deep. So deep.
All this great science that you can drop right into your game and make it feel Star Trek. So you got it right from the source here, folks.
Yeah. And you think the planet as in a planetoid, the environment's also going to be dangerous. This is one of those space will kill you because there's no atmosphere. So you have to have EVA suits. It's a low gravity environment. So anything that you do is going to feel like there's more momentum to it. There isn't. It's just like, hey, if I jump, I'm going to jump really high and then come down with the same force that I would have normally jumped at. Mm-hmm. Or if I start moving really fast, it's going to be harder to stop, that kind of stuff. But it's a deadly environment. And things might weigh less, but they still have the same amount of mass.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you're a game master looking for interesting venues and places to stage, desperate conflicts or encounters or something, just get yourself an EVA suit on a planetoid that has no atmosphere and low gravity. And ratchet up that complication range, spend some threat, get some traits going on in there, and see what happens. Like, how do your players approach a fight differently when they know if my EVA suit gets a cut or something happens, then I'm in real trouble, even beyond the adversary I'm facing. Like, there's the whole environment thing to tie into that. So certainly play with that. All right, great. Let's talk a little bit about. Now, this is something I really knew nothing about prior to reading your description here in the book. But tell us a little bit about gray goo.
Okay, gray goo. So when the episode of Lower Decks came on, that actually had like this material that actually just took inorganic material and grew new life forms out of it, I immediately thought of a gray goo situation. That this was bad. Now, gray goo is like a real idea, and it actually comes from an engineer that's named Drexler. It's not our Drexler. It's a different Drexler, but he kind of came up with this idea of a nanoplague. That, hey, it's very possible that if we made self-replicating nanomachines, that they could go out and just basically eat everything and turn it into more versions of themselves, and all that would be left is a big ball of gray goo where Earth used to be. So the gray goo, I had to come up with a acronym that would spell out gray goo. So genetic replication engrams from geological originating objects, basically saying, hey, there's machines that take geological originating objects, non-organic material, and turn it into genetic material.
Fantastic. And how many minutes did it take you to do that?
I don't know. I don't know. It wasn't that long. I was just like, okay, I need to spell out gray goo. All right. But nanites aren't a thing that is unknown in the Star Trek universe. We've known that the Borg have had them forever, and medical nanites would have been a thing, likely even into like the 23rd century. It seems like that would not be difficult for the technology to really allow to be developed. Okay, but it's how do you control that kind of technology? What is it typically used for? And I go into a few other things later in this chapter of what nanites are actually used for that aren't like Borg-ish style nanites that will literally go into your cells, rewrite your DNA, and then take the minerals in your blood and create cybernetic implants out of them. Like medical nanites would be a thing that you would inject into yourself and they would sit there and repair damage, or slice out damaged DNA out of your cells to repair, like, let's say, cancer. That's why there's no cancer.
It's supposed to be a comedy show, mommy.
I know it's supposed to be comedy, and this is the point of the gray goo that was from that episode, is that if Cerritos was good to be there, and solving the problem as it is because if you have enough material around where this gray goo can just breed, you might not be able to stop it. And yeah, that's scary. But the comedy of it is, hey, look, I can use medical nanites for comedic purposes, but there's a fine line between comedy and body horror. And we need to keep that in mind, folks.
Yeah.
And I give like the example, it might be really funny to buff up really fast to get like huge muscles using medical nanites to help build extra muscles. But if there is a problem with those medical nanites, you don't want all of your tissue turning into muscle, because then you have no nervous system. Mm-hmm. And that's the body horror aspect. Like, yeah, there's a fine line between having something that might be a little funny for a quick gag to being, hey, this is actually either a story point that can be made for a serious story, or maybe we don't want to take it that far.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Every one of these paragraphs could become its own story.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I appreciated about the whole Grey Goo description is that it had me thinking about the replicators from Stargate SG-1. Just these nanites that just consume everything in their path, and they connect together and they make bigger. They make ships, or they make things and more of themselves, and they just continue to consume and consume and consume. And it's like the Borg, but even worse, because they are just unstoppable. And obviously they found ways to stop them, but I just love the concept. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a real body horror element to this that doesn't really bear, for me anyway, close scrutiny, because it just sets my hackles off.
Yeah.
And I know there's some fans out there. In fact, today I was reading a Discord commentary from somebody who was talking about their player characters are on a Borg ship, and what would they do if they encountered some Borg drones who had just been Borgified, right? Would they try to stop them? Would they try to get away? And my thought was like, what are they even doing lounging around on a Borg cube? Get them the heck out of there. Start sending some thread, because a Borg cube is not a place you just kind of like visit and socialize and stuff. There's a terrifying aspect, especially when the Borg first appeared in Next Generation. Like, they were scary as heck. And I think they lost a little bit of that edge as they continued to go back, use them over and over again. But you just think about, I think they did a great job with this, with Picard reflecting on it in Brothers, like after the fact, like they take everything away from you that you are, and like if you just think about that, right? Like, you are a person with your own thoughts and feelings and agency, and the Borg assimilate you and take all of that away. That is not a happy, fun place to be, right?
And they don't even have to actively do it. That's the thing. Like, you can, that's that, and it feeds into your whole why are you lounging around on a Borg cube? And it's because these nanites would be all over everything, and you touch things. And it's kind of like, hey, when you're walking around in real life and you're touching things that people that have had a cold have also touched. It's a matter of time before you catch that cold. And yeah, you can be on that Borg cube for a little bit in an emergency, but you're going to go through that transporter decon real fast and real hard. And it's probably going to take out all your microfauna in your gut just to make sure you're clean. But if you're just hanging out on that cube, that's kind of terrifying. That's going towards that. But I also mentioned in here, like, macro scale von Neumann probes, which is also another real life kind of idea of self-replicating probes that would, hey, I send out a von Neumann probe to Proxima Centauri, and it takes an asteroid, breaks it down into other material, and then builds another von Neumann probe out of it. And then they go on to 2 different star systems and keep doing that. And that sort of idea, you after millions of years, you suddenly have a galaxy filled with von Neumann probes. So there are real science ideas, or at least real science philosophical ideas, that I try to punch through here all the time.
So deep. Don't ever skip an Aaron chapter, people, ever.
There's just so much. There's so much in here. I mean, we're not going to touch on all of it, obviously, but he goes into, or you go into some discussions on strange energies, metaphysical conundrums, the koala. You mentioned the koala at the edge of space and time, of course, earlier. There's a full sidebar going into even further detail on nanites. Here's an interesting little bit. Why don't you talk a little, because I think in some degree, nanites and parasites and symbiotes are all kind of weirdly related, connected kind of bit. Talk a little bit about the section you wrote up about parasites and symbiotes.
Yeah, I think that there's some terminology that was not used right in Lower Decks. And it was during that episode with Cupid's arrow. And I specifically talk about it here, where they refer to the little thing that Boimler has as a parasite, and it's actually a symbiote. And the difference is that a symbiote helps the host in some way, shape, or form to be better than it would be by itself. Okay. And a parasite harms the host to benefit only itself. So Boimler having this little thing on him that helps him become irresistible to the opposite sex is a benefit to him. It actually helps that creature reproduce and also helps the symbiote reproduce. So it's a benefit to both of them. Therefore, it's actually a symbiote, just kind of like a Trill symbiote. It's a benefit to both of the beings that are there, right? So parasites tend to hurt the host. So if it was a parasite, it would likely hurt Boimler's life in some way, shape, or form to only benefit itself.
Well, can't then in that case a symbiote, become a parasite in the sense that it gets you with somebody, and then that relationship starts destroying you. So now it's almost parasitical in nature.
Yeah, but then that's like a social parasite, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I try to define what a parasite and a symbiote is. And medical nanites would be a symbiote, that it's there to help repair damage. It benefits you. The nanites aren't going out of control and turning you into gray goo, but they are there to help you, and you're providing a environment where they can actually reproduce and continue to help you. Whereas the Borg nanites are a parasite. They go in and actively harm you for the benefit of themselves and the collective.
Man, I could riff on that, because then but at the same time, they're elevating you in some senses. They're making a better you. You're just losing self, right?
Yes. So you could argue that from the Borg collective's perspective, they are a symbiote, but from everyone else's perspective, it would be parasitical in nature. But
that's deep.
Trying to put the nanites in with parasites and symbiotes might be stretching it a bit. Like trying to define
nanites is more a tool to help it achieve its.
Yeah, but in one way, you can also think of nanites as being living things. They're just made out of artificial, non-biological material. So exocomps would be in the same kind of category as nanites. Nanites could be self-aware, couldn't they?
Yeah, totally. We
see little nano creatures in TNG being completely self-aware and self-organizing. Like the ones that I think it's the ones that Wesley accidentally releases, right? They start self-organizing.
Yeah, the ones that exocomps were protecting, right? The exocomps were actually protecting, weren't they? Or no? I'm getting mixed up.
Different episode.
Yeah, I'm thinking the Geordi LaForge terraforming episode. Never mind.
So yeah, I guess that sort of this whole section starts adding into this idea of what is life then. It can be completely artificial, but if it grows, adapts, and is self-aware, then that's life. But yeah,
this proves why, even if people are not into the humor of Lower Decks, that this book is definitely a pickup, because just this science alone, this chapter, it's so good.
Yeah.
Cool.
But medical nanites go into cybernetics. And that's the next section that I talk about, like how cybernetics and memory loss, because we're dealing with Rutherford and his memory loss and his cybernetics. And it's this idea that in order to fix a problem that is inside your nervous system, like your memory, or like in your brain somewhere, all right, that sometimes the damaged tissue that's there will need to be excised along with some material that might be around it, so the cybernetic implant can actually integrate itself with your biology properly. So you might lose more than was actually damaged. So I give some ideas of how that might affect a character, how you should approach it as a player to your game master, and any sensitive issues that might arise, because memory loss is a thing that actually is a problem in real life. And let's be sensitive about it and talk to the players at the table if there is any problems with role-playing a character that suffers from memory loss.
Smart. And did you also do the part on cybernetics in the Discovery book where they actually have the cybernetic character? Yeah, I thought you did that right up too. So I know that goes into more cybernetics there. There were a lot of cybernetic characters that came out of the Klingon Federation War.
Yeah. Because it's an easy way to fix damage. I shouldn't say easy. It's a way to quickly fix damage to a person where we clearly know that there's technology out there in the Star Trek universe that you can regrow damaged organs or basically regrow anything, but it's how bad the damage is or how quickly you need it fixed, because it might take 2 or 3 months to regrow an arm, but you might be able to install a cybernetic arm in a couple hours if it's available, right? And then in the 24th century, it might be the same thing. I can just replicate artificial eyes or, some sort of sensory organ and install it, or I'm going to have to keep you in sick bay underneath like the isolation dome to keep you stable while I grow something. And do I need you on duty? Does the ship need you on duty? What are the concerns here? And I guess that's a different way to like approach it in game is, do I want my character out from this horrific wound for a couple missions while he's stuck in sick bay, he or she is stuck in sick bay, or do I want to approach it by getting cybernetics on the character? And what will that mean for the character and what will that mean for the game? Just ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is another one of those cases where you can certainly go on a certain level and keep it light and fun and lower decks and silly. But if you really dig into this, you could get into that whole kind of cyberpunk aspect where like you are the more implants you need or the more implants you choose to install, like there's a corresponding potential loss of humanity. And what does that mean for your character, right? Like as your character is overtaken by either the nanites or the cybernetic implants or whatever, they start to lose that sense of self or that sense of humanity. I mean, like even, we know that different parts of the brain control different things and there's different stuff going on. And like you lose pieces of that, then all of a sudden, I mean, like you did a great job writing up a lot of that stuff, but to take that into a role-playing game and to really dig down into that, I think that would be a great conversation for a session 0 with your fellow players. Like if you had a character concept that was, starting to lose their sense of self because of the need to have the cybernetics to keep them alive. Like, what does that mean for the character and the conversations you can have? And oh gosh, what if one of the other players is playing the counselor? Boy, you get some seriously deep role-playing scenes out of that. And there's just so much potential there. And it all feels real, like we've seen it on the show, right? Like Barial has a lot of cybernetics installed into him as he's dying because Vedic Wind or Kai Wind desperately needs him to be alive long enough to get through a negotiation. But so they have to install so much stuff into him to keep him alive that any sense of who Barial was is gone. And then to a lesser extent, Nog gets his leg implant replacement. And that has an impact on him. I mean, I don't know that it necessarily took a lot of who he was away, but it certainly changed him as a character. And that sort of stuff is just like that's the yummy stuff that you want to have in a role-playing game session with the right group of players to really dig down into that stuff. So this is all great stuff. And this is what fans probably aren't expecting to see in a book about lower decks. And I love that because I always want to surprise the fans a little bit. And give them something different. So great stuff here. It's not all
Kalus's fornication helmet. It has to have some sort of like grounding in sci-fi. Thoughtful. How am I going to approach this, or these kind of high concept ideas? I think one of like the biggest thing with cybernetic implants that I tend to think about is with Rutherford. It's his connection to the world is completely different because when you see things from his perspective, there's always this HUD. And that changes his perception of the world around him. How does that how is he different? If everything else stayed the same, how would he be different just from before where he's seeing the world through his own eyes and in this natural sense? And now all of a sudden there's a HUD overlay on everything. And there's constant information streaming to him for like his emotions or, data on who this person is, because his memory might be spotty at times. Yeah, that changes a person. And it's that kind of disconnection from reality that can cause a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know we could go even further. I think there's so much here we could unpack and like even getting into like the whole, that whole memory question, right? Like what are his memories? Like what can he believe? What's an implant? What's real? What's like what doesn't he? What did he lose that he doesn't remember losing? Right? Like it's that whole questioning of self and memory, and oh boy, there's all kinds of stuff you can do with that.
I think we're going to need to do a riff episode just on this chapter.
Yeah, seriously, we'll have to come back to this point. But yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
no, don't apologize. This is all great stuff. This is all great grist for the RP world. So that was all section 4.1. That was like the first half of chapter 4. Just a wealth of material there just to dig into. But let's move on to the second one. And again, this is a section of the book that I don't really think anybody's really expecting to see in lower decks. Because like I knew this is something I wanted to fit into a book somewhere, and just knowing the production schedule, this was the best place to put it. And so what we've done is, of course, this was coming off of lower decks, and I apologize. I'm gonna sneeze here. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry. Just so everyone knows, while he's sneezing, my allergies. I went to North Carolina and came back. Killed me, my allergies. Oh. I've had this cough for 3 weeks. I'm not even sick, but I'm so embarrassed to be around people because I think they're going to think I have COVID or something. So I can hardly go 3 sentences without coughing now, which is why I keep muting myself today. So don't worry, Jim, I empathize.
Yeah, my apologies. So like we tend to do these pretty much, we're one hit wonders, right? One shot, one go. We don't really, I mean, Jeff might do a little editing on the back end, but this is straight shot. So apologies for the sneeze, but like sometimes you just can't stop it. And I'd rather put myself on mute than have you all be exposed to that.
Don't worry, Aaron will write up some game mechanics for sneezing.
There you go. Anyway, so all that being said, so the second part of this chapter is we titled it The Menagerie, and I was thinking about this coming off of Utopia Planitia, where we did all these great generational things about how to build a starship, how to build a space station, how to build a small craft, right? And we knew that in some of the other books, there were other things kind of sort of similar to this. And I was like, we never really did a top-down how to build an alien creature kind of thing. Like we got how to build NPCs, we got how to build ships, all this stuff. Excuse me. Stupid. Oh, that cat. Jeez. Okay. I'm all right. All good. Anyway, so it's just that night. I sneezed and the cat's knocking stuff over. Whatever. It's lower decks at its finest. Things are happening in the meta. Anyway, so we wanted to have an opportunity to finally put into place some detailed rules on how to build out your own creatures. So with that being said, Aaron, why don't you walk us through some of the stuff that you dropped in here?
Yeah, when you told me that you wanted to have something like this in here, I actually thought that this assignment was the most difficult one that I've had for Star Trek Adventures, believe it or not. And it was because I kept thinking starships are easy, because you can define them very, very easily with their systems, but life forms are infinite. How do I really try to boil this down into easily digestible bits without getting really too far into the weeds and writing 300 pages on or more on designing life forms? So it was more, this feels to me more like guidelines. Here's an outline for how you would design your creature. And it's because creatures aren't equal in nature, right? Like a bunny is not going to be able to stand up to a bear. And they're two very different creatures with two very different concepts behind them. So like step one would have to be like what I wrote here is environment and niche. What environment does it live in? What niche does it exist in inside its ecosystem? Okay. So, is it from a class M planet? So it's kind of recognizable to us. All right. Well, if it's from a class M planet, what is it like an insectoid-ish? Is it a dinosaur-ish? Mammal analogs? There's still a huge variety, but what niche is it in? So is it a predator? Is it a top predator? Is it an omnivore? Is it an herbivore herd animal? Is it like an insect? Something like that. So think of kind of where you want to put it in your world and then describe your traits, okay? Because now that you have this idea of the environment that it's from and its niche, you can start trying to go, okay, well, traits kind of describe the creature in a lot of ways, like its exact environment. If it's from a class M planet, is it an avian? Is it a ground burrowing animal? Is it just a four-legged ground animal, two-legged, that kind of thing. And really try to go into it. Is it nocturnal? Is it, just all these different ideas. Describe traits. Okay. So it helps you kind of narrow in exactly what this creature is. And then step 3 is scale attributes, disciplines, and focuses. And I try to base this on the size of the creature, because larger creatures can be more complex. So, humans are a bit more complex in our skills, abilities, how we act than, let's say, a fly. Not saying that a fly isn't a complex creature, because it is, but it also isn't a tool user. All right. So, we go from microscopic all the way up to cosmozoan size giant creatures that can move through space. And the larger that it is, the more attribute points, the more disciplines, focuses, and talents that it can generally have.
Which is important, because all these crazy creatures in Lower Decks, and of course in Star Trek, but it seems like every single episode of Lower Decks there's some strange creature that they're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also tried to justify like the idea of more focuses and talents with the larger it is, because larger creatures tend to, at least on Earth, the larger the creature, the longer it tends to want to live. That's not always the case, but longer lived creatures tend to develop more learned or inherited skills. Let's put it that way. And that's making a very broad generalization, admittingly. But again, this is trying to do a very top-down, broad. Here, I'm giving you guidelines, not writing a dissertation.
I love it. I have one question for you, Jim.
Okay.
None of this was a random table for generating it.
Yeah, I don't think we had the space for another random table. But B, I don't think it really lent itself to a random table, right? Because this is really about like being a game master, sitting down at the table and thinking about what kind of a creature do I want to make out. Now, I mean, certainly you could very easily turn this into a random table and like, it's energy based. Oh, and it's got mimicry. Oh, and it's got multi limbs. Sure, I mean, you can do it random like that. Why not? Because I'm willing to bet some of the creatures in Lower Decks are pretty random. Like, let's make it a Hydra with like 30 heads and a scorpion stinger and it can turn invisible. Okay, sure, that's a horrifying creature. That would be fun to throw at the crew, but
I would encourage people, if they want to, just make their own random table. Just throw out the dice on that.
Yeah, I didn't want to put a random table in for this, just because I assumed that when the game master is designing the creature, they don't want it to be random. They're trying to stat out something that they already have an idea for in their plot. They kind of want it to be able to do certain things. So here's how to get it to do the things that you want it to do in your plot, rather than just kind of randomly doing it. Yeah, absolutely. It could have random tables, but I thought that would just be too much for this. Again, these kind of broad guidelines. So, I give ideas about attacks, like what creatures how they can attack, what kind of defenses they might or might not have. If you're a fleshy gas bag, or if you're a heavily armored like Ankylosaur, there's a big difference there, right?
Really fun stuff. So fun.
Yeah. And so random table, I think that would be a great addition to continuing mission, right? One of the writers wants to take the Lower Decks campaign guide, take all this content and say, hey, if you've got the Lower Decks campaign guide and you want to make a new creature, but you don't necessarily have the time to sit down and cogitate on it, then here's a couple random tables that coincide with all the content that's already in here. And
I'll plug Tony Pie, because if you go to continuing missions and you go to the very top bar, it has 2 creature generators.
There you go.
And you can go in there and it's not exactly like this, of course, but it's pretty, has a lot of stuff in there that that could help people use those randomizers to create their own creatures.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for it. But at the same time, I'm also all for game masters putting in the sweat equity and thinking about it. Like, and this is no slight on anybody, right? Like I remember back in the day as a game master, like random tables were a blessing, and there are still days I wish I had a good random table for names, because I'm horrible coming up with names on the fly. So I like to have random tables, especially for names, or at least name generators. But yeah, so if you need a random table, then, like you said, Tony's got a couple. I'm sure somebody will create a new one based on all this great content. And, if you want to actually think about it and be super intentional about creating a creature, then, you can use this stuff. But, to Aaron's credit, like, this is a great toolbox, and we got it in 5 pages, right? Or, yep. I mean, even 4, if you pull the artwork out, because we put a lot of great artwork in here. So, 4 pages. Here's everything. Well, not everything, but here's all the great tools you need to start building your own creatures. And I think this is a piece of the game that I don't want to say was lacking, but we just haven't had an opportunity to plug this kind of thing in somewhere. I think if I had thought of it, 3 years ago, I would have put it into Shackleton. But there was so much stuff in Shackleton already that I was just like, we've already got a great randomizer for sectors and planets and stuff, and that was 5 or 6 pages, and I think you did a sterling job on that, just getting all as much as we could condensed down into and there were some tables in there, but
that could have easily been 30 pages.
Yeah, it could have been its own book, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean, if I just let you loose and have you write a 200-page Star Trek science RPG book, it would be amazing. But
I'm sure most people would think it would be really dry and dull from a story perspective. But yeah, it would be filled with information that was sciencey. But I give an example for this that you can kind of follow through, and it shows how to build a creature that we've seen on screen, which is the Genesis worm. That is that kind of weird, long, snaky looking thing. And I even give it a name. What do I call it here? I call it Macrobacillus halodurans genesisi. So like just a weird Latin name. That's kind of what I think is also fun, is coming up with fun Latin names for critters, even if they're not exactly appropriate. But it's fun, and then it lends like an interesting sounding name to the game that you're running, just because you can say, oh yeah, that there's a library file from the computer here about this creature, and you can hand it off and it has this cool looking name, and I don't know.
Well, that's how I use. I mean, I literally use pieces from all these books or Wikipedia or whatever just to create those library files to cut and paste into our game, since I play on Discord primarily, or to hand to my players. So it's so valuable. I have to think less and I can play more.
And I put in a combination of what's already been published plus some extra things in here about like talents and special rules that the critters can have. But because I do know that there were pieces of this published in a whole bunch of the different publications already, and then I tried to fill in some gaps that I saw. But yeah, that's it. That's chapter 4.
Yeah, and I mean we've gone on for like an hour now, and like seriously, folks, chapter 4 is 11 pages. Like there's not that many pages in that book, in that chapter, but those 11 pages are absolutely packed full of stuff. So for you to think about it, and like I'm confident we could riff and create several seasons worth of material just out of those 11 pages, right? And go on all day long about it. So seriously, folks, check it out, because like I said, we try to surprise you with every release by putting stuff in there that you wouldn't expect to see. And I hope you have a chance to check it out and dig it, and then make use of it, because I just can't wait to see what the fans come up with in terms of like wacky, unusual creatures and spatial phenomenon and just all kinds of stuff that just let their give them. Again, it's like we talk about this all the time, right? I'm sure people are sick of hearing it, but like we just give them more tools. And then I just want to see what they build with it. Like look at all these cool tools we're giving you in Lower Decks, and now go build something with it and show it to us, and send it to Michael for continuing mission, or just post it on the the Facebook group or the Reddit or whatever. Share it with the other fans, and let's have some fun with it. So yeah, great stuff, Aaron.
Aaron, always. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm not. I'm thinking that our episode for chapter 7 will be like 4 hours long, since this was 11 pages, and I wrote all of chapter 7, and it's, I don't know, like 30 something.
Maybe we'll break it up. It's a continuing conversation, you know, so that's what we do. But Aaron, it's always such a pleasure. I mean, I know I have fun playing with you constantly online on Discord, and I'd have it no other way. So it's really nice whenever you come on the show and spread your love and knowledge of science and pseudoscience. We love both of them. Awesome.
Well, I'm happy to share it, and I'm sorry for babbling and
this is the show's for this. Remember that. That's why we come.
No apologies necessary. We will edit that out. No apologies necessary.
Okay.
Do not apologize for your passion.
Exactly. All right, cool. All right. So we head off into gratitude. What I want to do again is, normally I do the brick and mortar, but I wanted to expand the love a little bit and ask the crowd there in the social media universe what they love about STA. Jonathan Rupert, he writes that he loves how Star Trek, the system, feels. One way he tries to quantify it to people is basically that Star Trek doesn't rely on action or fighting as a show. Usually people come to the table for a TTRPG expecting some combat, even if it's loose. STA feels like Trek in that you never even think about combat unless the situation truly calls for it. And often players will seek peaceful resolutions to situations rather than fight it out. Unless it's a Klingon game, then things are much different. Laugh out loud. All right. So thank you, Jonathan Rupert. We appreciate you telling us why you appreciate the game. Aaron, what about you? Gratitude?
I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be able to watch a television show and sit down and think for a while about how things work, and how I can explain things using real science or close to real science, let's say, and then share it with everyone out there. And at least a few of people out there might actually like it. That's seriously gratitude that I have that opportunity. Thank you very much, folks.
Hey, man, I told you've stunned me more than one occasion. I have an adventure that's going a certain way. You throw out some science and I have to go run to Wikipedia to be like, I gotta balance this back. So Aaron, you keep me thinking, which is why I like playing. So thank you for that. All right, Jim, take us out.
I am every day, and I know I don't talk about this much, or I know I've talked about it some, but I am grateful every day to be doing this. And to have the opportunity to do this, to take a franchise that I love so much and that I've loved for my entire life, and to be able to kind of shepherd this game line along to the next level, and to bring all of you along with me, and to see you all just make such amazing things, and then to be able to share those amazing things with fans all around the world, and then to see them do stuff with it. Like it just builds on each other, right? It's like, oh, I get to do this, and then I get to give other people opportunities to write things that they're passionate about, and then it just builds on itself. And then to be able to share it with people and to see what they do with it, and to see how excited they are every time a new release comes out, and to see the Twitches and the YouTube channels and the conversations that they're having online. And it's so it's humbling to be involved in it, but it's so inspiring at the same time, because it's such a different beast than other RPGs that I'm familiar with, because like so many of the fans approach it in a very thoughtful fashion, and the game makes you think. And I think this is a testament to Nathan Dowdell for making such a great game system that gives you an opportunity to do combat, but that's not the focus, right? The focus is about the characters and the storytelling and the dramatic situations that you get into. And of course, Star Trek is a morality play. And it gives you the opportunity to have these really deep, thoughtful conversations. And 99 times out of 100, when I come out of a game session for Star Trek, I'm so wired, because I'm thinking about all the things that happen and all the possibilities that are going on, and like all the different directions the story could go. And I see it every time you guys deliver me a manuscript. It's like, oh man, there's just so much stuff here. I just wish I had the time to actually, play or run it. And I'll get there eventually. I'm sure, but I'm just grateful to be doing this, and that people are digging it. Because, I know, I've said it before. Like, if we didn't have fans that were eating this stuff up, we wouldn't still be doing it. And so I'm grateful to the fans that they're doing it, and I'm grateful to Paramount, and grateful to Modifius, keeping it alive, keeping it going here. And, the sky's the limit at this point, and we'll just keep it going. So just, a lot of gratitude for everything that's happening.
All right. And grateful to everyone who keeps listening in, tuning into Continuing Conversations, even going back and catching us on Spotify or YouTube or wherever your favorite podcasting services. Of course, Studio Timbo putting us out there across all of those platforms. So thank you to everyone who keeps playing Star Trek RPG and keeps the conversation continuing. All right. IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. We'll talk to you all next time.